Hello, and welcome back to the reading of Our Mother's Sore Expectation by Dr. Kehinde Ayeni. We're going to continue reading from page 222, and yeah, it's been a while, but it's good to be back here reading. Page 222. By the time Teju arrived in Ibadan from Iroko, there were about 2,000 women there with their drummers singing and chanting songs of sorrow. Teju walked among the women and greeted them in groups and individually when she could. She asked to see the governor, but his staff would not let her into the building. She told the governor's assistant that the women would stay put until he granted them audience. She addressed the women who were gathered and she commended them on their peaceful manner. She encouraged them to continue to demonstrate in such a peaceful way and that they would stay there until the governor came out to speak with them. He is not a man of his word, and he is a coward. Otherwise, he would not be afraid to come out and meet us. We are the mothers of this region after all. We will stay here until he gives us audience. We have some messages that we need him to deliver to that monster Rahim for us. We need him to tell Rahim that we have given him more than enough sacrifices and now we demand payments. We have no more children for his insatiable appetite. She called the other local presidents from the different towns such that more women would come down so that they could participate in shifts to sit at the governor's office. Teju was not disappointed at the behavior of the governor. It was what she expected. So they sat and sang and danced until the close of the day when the governor snuck through the back of his office and ran away to his mansion about a mile from the office. The women, following Teju's directions, followed him singing and dancing as they went to the mansion as well. When they arrived there, the military security at the gates would not let them in, so they sat on the grounds by the gate to the mansion, spilling onto the road, and in the process, they blocked off the traffic to the mansion and the houses of top government officials close to the mansion. The women continued to sing and dance, and the drummers continued to drum for them. They sang about the cowardice of the governor and about what a murderer he was. They sang songs sung at funerals and wakes. They sang lamenting the plights of mothers in the country who had to keep burying their children killed by the government. They sang songs of dead children, mentioning the children by name, and they inserted the names of the governor's 4 children as some of the dead children. They sang songs of messages that they hoped the governor would deliver to Lagos for them, to President Rahim and the Vice President Adewale, who in their opinion was a bastard. He had sold his own people. He had a very good education but did not want other Yoruba children to have any education. And on they sang through the night, taking turns to rest and sleep so that they were not exhausted. In the morning, another group of about 3,000 women arrived in buses from different parts of the region to relieve the women who had been there for the previous 24 hours. When the governor left his mansion to drive to his office, the women followed him on foot, singing and dancing. The new group brought with them 4 black coffins, which they carried on their heads, crying, wailing, and falling over themselves in mock funeral procession. The coffins had the names of the governor's 4 children on them. This continued all day. By the afternoon of the second day, the governor's office building, which also housed a lot of the government's ministries, was a beehive of activities as other people joined the demonstration and sitting women. People were hawking food and drinks so the women would not be hungry or thirsty. Church groups joined them with their own songs and prayers. People who wanted to see the governor could not go in to see him as the women barred the way. The soldiers looked on helplessly or even looked the other way. At some point, Two of the young military policemen guarding the governor came out to escort a man who thought he was very important and had to see the governor at all costs through the throng of women into the office. They would not let him through. One of them pushed a woman who was in her 60s. The woman started to wail and lay on the ground as if she had been wounded and could not get up. The other women around her started to shout at the soldier, "You have been killing our young children, and now you want to start killing our grandmothers, is it? You want to kill all of us so the world will belong to you soldiers alone?" The young soldier started to apologize. He tried to help the older woman up from the ground, but she would not get up. The women continued to curse at him and heap abuses on him. More and more people gathered close to see what was going on. Another woman spotted the very important personality that the soldiers were trying to escort through. She called him by name and she informed the women that he was one of the killers. "He is a thief," the women shrieked. "He is one of the people who was awarded government contracts and didn't do what he was supposed to do." The man looked terrified and tried to force his way through, but the women told him that he was going nowhere. He had to join them in the demonstration. He had cheated them enough. He had the contract to build a general hospital in a village, and the hospital was supposed to serve all the neighboring villages of about 20,000 people. When he was awarded the contract, he built the frame of the hospital and stopped there. No windows, no doors. He just joined together 4 walls, and that was it, 5 years ago. He claimed that the government did not give him enough money, and yet he went to his own village and built a $1 million 20-bedroom mansion with swimming pools and tennis courts, and 6 to 10 times a year he would bring all his rich friends from the big cities and hold carnival-type parties there. The hospital was never built, and the over 20,000 people who could have been served by the community hospital had to travel many miles to the nearest one in Ibadan. Many people had died in emergency situations before they got to Ibadan. When the women finished telling this story to the other women, they accused him of being a murderer as well. Some of the people around him, most of whom were from the villages that the hospital would have served, were it completed, told him the names of their neighbors and loved ones who had died because of his failure to complete the hospital. They held him hostage, and when the young soldier tried to protest, they asked him to leave immediately with the promise that if he didn't leave them immediately, they would take his clothes off him. He ran away. Before the end of the day, the women took 3 more hostages. Their most prized captive was the Minister for Internal Affairs, who was a woman. Dr. Yemi Ajande, a medical doctor, was 56 years old. Her office was in charge of the smooth running of the many ministries for the welfare of the citizens in the country. She came to Ibadan to meet the governor to discuss ways of handling the demonstrations that were going to grind the state into a halt. Women were not selling in the markets anymore. People had stopped going to their jobs, claiming that they could not work when they had not eaten. Public transportation in many cities had stopped because the drivers, most of whom were males, did not have passengers, so they too joined the women in their demonstration. After the demonstrating women took her hostage, while she attempted to walk through them to the governor's office, they started to sing songs that she was not a woman, but a man under all the clothes that she was wearing. They sang, "Dokita Ajade is not a woman. If she was a woman who had knelt down in pain to have a child wrenched out of her, if she was a woman who had nursed a child at her breast, if she was a woman who had stayed up at night to care for a sick child, if she was a woman who had had a child grace her back, and if she was a woman who had watched a child grow with many tears and anxiety, and if she was a woman who had laughed and danced for joy at the accomplishments of her child, she would not have joined the ranks of the governor, who was no more a father since his 4 children were dead. She would not join the ranks of Vice President Adewale, the impotent bastard. because at the age of almost 50 years old, he should be a father, and he is not. But since she's not a woman, she could not understand the plight of mothers who had to stand by and watch their children get killed. So, because she isn't a woman under all those clothes she had on, she wouldn't know these things. They sat her down with other three hostages, tied them one to another, and they continued with their songs, dancing to all these sorrowful words. The governor sat in his office unable to function. It was not just the noise from the demonstration, but the things that they were singing about. Being a very superstitious man, he did not like the idea of women carrying black coffins with his children's name on them around in mock funeral processions. He had already called his four children 3 times since 8 o'clock this morning, having had them pull out of their classrooms in their many universities in England to speak with them and assure them that they were alive. He called his wife at home in the governor's mansion and asked her to go to England to be with the children. He was afraid that if these women wished his children dead hard enough, they might die. Terrified, he had also asked Lagos to speak with the vice president, and all Adewale told him was to curb the nonsense as soon as possible. The Internal Affairs Minister, who happened to be a Yoruba woman, had responded to his pleas and came down immediately, hoping that the women would see her as one of them and that she would be able to appease them. But they had held her hostage too. He entertained the idea of going out to meet with them, but was afraid they might arrest him, which would make him look inefficient and weak. He sat in his office and sweated. Later in the afternoon, at about 3 o'clock, the identity of the student killed the previous day was revealed to Teju. He was a 20-year-old law student from the northern part of Western region, an orphan who had been raised by the people of his village. They had all put money together to send him to university. He was the first from his village to have matriculated into a college. Teju put on the loudspeaker to address the demonstrating people. My mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers, I want to thank all of you for the great job that you are all doing here. We are civilized human beings who have been holding a peaceful demonstration for the past 30 hours. I want us to continue to do just that. Thank you very much. The drummers echoed her words with the talking drums. Teju looked down at them from the makeshift podium, nodded at them, did a little sad dance to their music, and thanked them for providing such beautiful music. I just received words as to the identity of our son who was killed yesterday and the reasons that we are all here today to ask the governor to give us audience, and the lying coward that he is, he has refused. The drummers echoed her by saying with their talking drums, lying coward who runs under the cover of the night. Teju thanked them again and continued, with heavy heart and many tears, I tell you that our son's name was Diji Ajala. He was from the village of Unikpashan near Shaki. He was an orphan, and the good people of his village, about 150 of them, raised this young man ever since he lost his parents at the age of 5 years old. They taxed and levied one another to send him to school, and he made them proud. He gained admission to the best university in West Africa, and he was on his way to becoming a lawyer. He was the hope of his village, every member of which was his father and mother. This is our son who the governor killed yesterday morning. There was a long silence after she was done. The drummers did not echo her words with their talking drums, and they did not produce any music. Everyone was quiet. Each person was thinking of the sacrifices that they had to make to send their children to school, or of the sacrifices that their families and the cooperative organizations in their villages and towns made to send them to school, and for the government to just kill that off. Teju did not want the people's silence replaced with rage and anger, so she capitalized on their reflections to encourage them to continue to demonstrate peacefully. She stressed to the people that they were not barbarians or hungry demonic creatures like the people in government, that they were not out to destroy but to build, and they were not to allow themselves to be dragged down to the level of the violent military dictators. We are above that all. All of us here are above them, she instructed the people. The drummers resumed their drumming by playing a slow, mournful, soothing music. Teju glanced down at them and nodded her thanks to them, and so the demonstration continued. When the governor closed for the day and went to his mansion, they followed him and they returned with him to the office in the morning. The women did not exhaust themselves. They took turns sitting in. Teju stayed with them most of the time, and she would go to her brother's house to sleep for a few hours a day, shower, and change her clothes. On the fourth day, her parents, Taiwo, and the principal joined the demonstration. They left Ireti behind in Iroko with her great-grandmother. On the fifth day of the demonstration, all the teachers in the state went on strike and joined the demonstration and the sit-in. Their students followed their teachers as well, and by the sixth day, the Nurses Association joined them. The doctors, unable to run the hospitals without the nurses, joined on the seventh day, and so the demonstration took a life on its own and grew. By the end of the week, the region had ground to a complete halt. Teju was anxious about the growing number of people. She was afraid that the demonstration would deteriorate into a riot, leading to more losses of life. So she addressed the crowd of people that had swelled up to about 20,000 every hour on the hour. She encouraged them to continue to be peaceful. She would say, "We are civilized people. We are not barbaric like the people in our government. We are not demonic creatures that eat children. We are human beings. We nurture children." The people listened to her, and for such a large crowd, the demonstration continued to be peaceful. By the end of the first week, international press arrived in droves, and they recorded everything about the demonstration. They wondered why the governor would not give the people an audience. The criticisms came from many groups. Teju was criticized for inciting people to start a war. The harshest criticism came from the organization of army officers' wives, headed by the First Lady Muji, who was also the president of the organization Better Life for Rural Women. The latter organization was set up by Rahim's administration as a way of appeasing the population by making promises to women that their welfare was of importance to the government. Periodically, about once in 6 months, the women all over the country would be asked to choose delegates to represent them in a 3-day convention in Lagos, which Muji would grace with her presence. The women would be encouraged to exhibit whatever it was that they grew or made as a way for them to advertise their trade. The government would announce to the country how these exhibitions were benefiting these women from the rural areas. They would also announce the amount of money, which usually ran into hundreds of millions of dollars, that they had invested in these women to assist them in promoting their trade. During these many conventions, journalists would interview the women to be sure that they were truly reaping the benefits that the government claimed that they were. And the women would tell the journalists a very different story. Very soon, when Muji invited them to Lagos for these conventions, the women refused to come, yet millions of dollars would be spent on these projects. Shortly after the last convention, which was poorly attended by the women who felt that it would be better to remain at home and attend to their businesses than waste their time in Lagos, there was a report in the press that Mrs. Mujisala Rahim, the First Lady of the nation, had attempted to transfer £800 million from her account in England to another bank in Switzerland, but that the British government refused to release all the money to her at once. The nation's conscience reported the news to the nation with speculations as to how it was possible for a woman who dropped out of law school, who did not practice a day of law in her life, and was not known to have had a job in which she earned wages, was able to have a large amount of money in her account. The citizens wondered and speculated too, but nothing came of it. Muji continued to be the first lady, and Rahim continued to be the president of the country. The city. So, on this day, with the demonstration going on in the western region by women who had chosen Teju to be their leader, Teju issued a statement from her position as the First Lady of the country, the president of the organization Better Life for Rural Women, and the president of the Army Officers' Wives Association. Her secretary read the statement on television, and she claimed that the First Lady signed it. The Western Region Market Women's Association was called an association of a bunch of crude, illiterate women who could not distinguish their right hand from their left, not to speak of knowing what was involved in the running of a government. They were accused of abusing the power that they had, since they were responsible for feeding the people of the region to blackmail a hard-working government. The statement continued that the First Lady asked the women to return to their homes and their jobs and not to allow a school dropout and a woman of questionable morals disguised in the form of Miss Tejumade Segi Moreni Keji alias Mama Ireti lead them astray. The morning after the statement was published, the country awoke to the news that 10 students who were officials of the Students' Association of 3 universities in Lagos, the seat of the federal government, had been killed overnight by the military. Their offense was that the military government heard rumors that the students' bodies were planning a demonstration like the one going on in Ibadan. When Teju heard the news, she burst into tears, and the women joined her. There were no more singing and dancing and mock funeral processions. The sight before hundreds of reporters was one of thousands of people weeping in unison. An hour later, there came news that 4 of the students killed were children of prominent and high-ranking military officers in the country. The people heard the news, but it did not make them feel better. Some people felt that it was the least that their parents deserved for failing to serve the people well. But most of the people felt that they were still children, fighting for a better life for themselves and the people around them. Teju quoted one of the aphorisms to herself: "If you throw a rock into the market, it will definitely hit your kinsman." Then came news that in the eastern and southern regions of the country, everyone was on strike and had taken to the streets in demonstration and protest. The students for the killing of their fellow students, the market women for the killings of their children, the labor unions for many grievances they had against the government, especially with regards to oil exploration and drilling in their part of the country, which had devastated their environment in terrible ways and from which there had been no benefit. Riots broke out in many other places with calls for secession. In the northern part of the country, the market women joined their sisters to demonstrate against the killing of innocent children, and the country was gradually grinding to a halt with anarchy threatening to break out. In the early afternoon, the Supreme Military Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the problem. Rahim made it clear to all the top military officers that the riots and demonstrations had to start. New members of the Supreme Military Council had lost their sons that morning. Later in the day, both Rahim and Adewale addressed the nation. They appealed to everyone to return to their homes, jobs, and schools, and that all their demands would be met. They made promises that all the schools would be well equipped and lecturers and teachers' wages would be paid on time. They promised the people of the eastern and southern regions that infrastructure developments would commence in their part of the country and compensation would be made to the people whose sources of livelihood had been destroyed by oil exploration and drilling. They told the country, that task forces would be set up and these would go around the country to speak with people to ask for their needs so that they would be met. They assured them that they were there for them and would work with them. After the address, the cowardly governor of the Western region, borrowing on the promises from Lagos, came out of his mansion to meet with the women. This was all they had asked of him in the first place. He repeated all that the president and the vice president said and made promises that in the Western region, the anti riot police will be disbanded. The security for the state would be handled by regular police officers. He assured the women that if students feel the need to demonstrate or protest again about anything, it was their right to do so, but that he would like them to meet with him first, and he promised to give them audience as soon as he could. If after he had met with them they still wanted to demonstrate peacefully, they were welcome to do so. He apologized on behalf of the administration for all the students who had lost their lives, and he promised adequate compensation to their families and villages of origin. The women who had been so demoralized by the killing of the 10 students that morning that all the taunting of the governor with songs and dances stopped. He concluded his speech and turned to Teju, asking her if there would be more. He needed her to disperse the crowd for him because he knew that they would listen to her and not to him. Teju came up to him and handed him pieces of paper. He looked at them and looked at her. In the papers, she had listed all his promises and all the promises made by the president and the vice president. They included everything from students' problems to their teachers' problems, the nurses and the doctors, labor unions, up to the pressing problems affecting the average citizens on the street. He stared at the paper for a long time, and Teju suggested to him that he signed the papers in front of all the people of the region and the world in the form of the journalists present. That as soon as he signed them, everyone will do as he said. She offered him a pen. He did not want to sign the papers. He knew that Rahim and Adewale would not fulfill any of the promises made to the people. They had said that all in the heat of the moment of all the riots and the death of the 4 generals' children. He knew that when things returned to normal, they would not care about the people. He stared at Teju and the pages. She stared back at him with her huge eyes. He knew that if he did not sign, the people would not leave. If he signed and did not fulfill his promises, they would be back with their songs that ridicule him. He weighed his options, looked at Teju again, and she met his gaze with her steady one. He took the pen she offered him and he signed the papers at the same time, wishing her dead. She thanked him and promised him that he would get a copy in the office first thing in the morning. She took the microphone from him and addressed her people. She thanked them for their hard work of the previous week and told them that they should be proud of themselves. She assured them that the governor would be held to all that he promised them since he signed the papers in front of the whole world, that they would all return to their homes and businesses and give the governor time to begin to work for the people. We might need to call on all of you in future if the government fails, so be prepared. The war hasn't been won yet. A truce has just been called. We are soldiers of freedom, and the fight for freedom never ends. I thank you, my mothers and fathers. I thank you, my sisters and brothers. And on behalf of everyone here today, I thank our fellow soldiers who have lost their lives in this war. They are the true heroes, our sons and daughters murdered by the government. People chanted Mama Ireti and dispersed. 2 days later, Adewale summoned the governor of the Western region to the presidential palace to debrief him about the events of the previous week and to demand of him the reasons why he allowed the situation deteriorate so much that it threatened to engulf the whole country. The governor, afraid that he might be relieved of his position because Adewale had been known to do things like that in a panic, explained the situation to him. He specifically told him that the woman who was the president of the Market Women Association for his region was the promise. He told him as much as he knew of Teju and the whole state would rather listen to her than to him. In a whining voice, he explained to Adewale that even that morning, as he was leaving Ibadan for Lagos to attend the meeting with him, he received a letter from her in which she told him that the Market Women Association had decided that the compensation to them that would be adequate for the lives of the children is the establishment of 10 scholarships a year in the name of each student killed, so other children could attend the universities. This does not include the compensation to those students' families. He complained that people have no respect for him in the region anymore. Just that morning, as he was driving through the city, people were cursing at him and calling him a murderer, and some people even threw eggs at his convoy of cars. Adewale looked at him with disgust, especially at the fact that a mere market woman who was probably an illiterate was terrorizing a general in the army. Are you telling me that this woman, Mama Iriti, is your problem in the region? He asked. The governor nodded. Is there any other problem or situation I should be aware of in the region? Because if this woman is your only problem, then you don't have a problem at all. I will personally take care of her. The governor explained to Adewale that Teju was his only problem and that the people would listen to her rather than to him. People who included doctors and nurses and even college professors listened to this woman and did whatever she told them to do. Adewale dismissed him and assured him that he would not have any more problems from the president of the Market Women Association. Then that he should return to his post and do whatever he was supposed to do, and that he did not want to hear or feel even a tremor coming from the Western region again, or else he should kiss his career goodbye. The governor stood up, nodded at Adewale, saluted him, and returned to Ibadan. After the governor left, Adewale called one of his assistants and told him that in the next 24 hours, he wanted to know everything there was to know about the president of the Market Women Association for the Western region, known as Mama Ireti. In the days after the demonstration, Teju busied herself visiting the families of the deceased students and assuring them that the government would be made to pay as much compensation as she could get for them. She also made the rounds of the major cities and associations to thank the market women for their good work in the week of the demonstration. She visited other associations and labor unions to thank them for their support and good work as well. At the end of the second week, she asked to meet with the governor of the Western region to demand from him all that he promised the people. His secretary, whom she spoke with on the phone to set up the appointment, gave her a time that was a month away. Teju told herself that she would work with them, so she accepted the date. She spent the month by continuing her visit to the people and emphasizing to them that they all had to work together to make the government pay attention to their needs. On the day of the appointment with the governor, she arrived 1 hour early at his office with families of the over 200 students who had been killed or maimed by the police during one demonstration or the other over the years, and they were kept waiting. The governor's secretary asked them to wait outside on the street as there was not enough room for the 325 of them in the waiting room. With Teju's encouragement, the people went and waited patiently outside on the street while she and 4 of the officials of the Western Region Market Women Association sat in the waiting room. The governor finally came out to meet with them 3 hours after the time of the appointment. He did not apologized for the delay, but asked Teju in a very cold voice what he could do for her. Teju, not referring to his rudeness in keeping them waiting, explained to him that they had come for the compensation that the government had promised the people. The governor started to speak, but she interrupted him by saying, "The families of the murdered and maimed students are outside, Governor. They chose me to be their spokesperson. I think that you should speak directly with them, Your Excellency." She left without allowing him to respond and returned with the people who filed into the governor's office, spilling into the secretary and the ADC's offices as well as the hallway. The governor, in a voice that he tried to make patient while maintaining eye contact with Teju, told the people that the government was working on the matter and as soon as they were done, they would be notified. "Your Excellency, please give us specific time so the people will know when to expect compensation for their murdered children and money to take care of their injured children. It will help them start the work of mourning for these children. As you know, Your Excellency, since you are a father, children are the most precious treasures from God, and nobody wants to bury his or her child. It is a pain that never goes away because it isn't a natural thing. I know, Governor, because I have buried 3 children myself. What helps in mourning and putting things to rest so you can at least attempt to go on with your life is the fact that justice has been served. We all know that justice can never be served in these cases, as it was your administration that ordered the killing and maiming of these defenseless children. But at least compensate these people for their losses. We demand to know, Governor, when these people will be compensated," she asserted and stared at him. The governor wished her dead, as he had done many times in the past months. He looked at the people and was quiet for a long time. He knew that Adewale and Rahim had no plans to pay any compensation to anyone. They had not referred to the matter since the people stopped the demonstration 5 weeks ago. He also knew that Teju would hound him to his grave if he did not do anything about it. She would come back with more people and might even organize another demonstration. "I understand your pain, and like Mama Ireti just said, I am a father too, and I know that we need to put these unfortunate incidents of the children who died during the riots to rest. I will do everything in my power to speed things up. I am appealing to all of you to give me time. I received my orders from Lagos. I can't act on anything on my own here. I will put pressure on them in Lagos, and I will get back to you," he explained to the people. The people mumbled amongst themselves in response to his non-committal statement. "We need a time period, Your Excellency," Teju shouted at him over the people's voices. "I will get back to you within a month, Miss Morenikeji," he replied quietly. "No, not to me, Governor, but to these many people here and their loved ones back home. Don't get back to me. Tell us when they will be compensated for their losses. We need specific time. You are a military man. You people don't speak in approximates when you talk about time. You are specific. You say at 100 hours and things like that. So why are you keeping us hanging? If you and your bosses in Lagos have no intention of compensating these people for maiming and murdering these children, at least have the courage to say so. Let them know that their children had been killed for nothing. Don't add insult to injury for them by giving them the runaround," Teju told him, trying very hard to control her anger. "Miss Morenikeji, as the representative of these many people, and like I told you, I will get back to you within the month, and that is it. Please excuse me," he said to her and made her turn around and go back into his office, but Teju shouting at his departing back. "Your Excellency, 5 weeks ago, you signed the papers which contained all our requests. That was the condition by which we ended the sit-in and the demonstrations at the time. You are now giving us the runaround. You are going back on your word. You are saying to yourself, they are foolish people, and I will just say what I like to get rid of them. it isn't going to happen. We hold people to their promises. We demand that you keep your word because you are the governor of this region. You are like a father to all of us. And if a father doesn't want to do his job, well, the children are sometimes in a position to make him do it, and we will. We shall leave now, but we will be back in 1 month. Trust us. After they left, the governor made frantic calls to Lagos to inform Adewale of the meeting with Teju and the people, and for the first time, he demanded in an assertive voice when the people would be compensated. Adewale was taken aback by the governor's boldness, and he asked him if there was another problem in the region. The governor explained to him that Teju had been to his office with over 400 people to demand the promised compensation, and he did not want her coming back with the people. He did not want another situation where there would be a sit-in like the embarrassing demonstration that occurred the month before. Adewale listened to the governor, and he asked him to send his to his office all the people's requests, and that he would get back to him within the week. The governor thanked him and promptly dispatched his ADC with the list from Teju for Adewale's immediate attention. A week later, Teju was surprised when the governor's secretary called her on the phone for a meeting with the governor. The governor did not keep her waiting when she arrived with the secretary for the Western Region Market Women Association. When the two women walked into his office, he stood up from his seat and politely offered them chairs. He had good news for them. He told them that all they had asked for had been granted. $50,000 would be given to the family of each of the injured and deceased students, and 10 scholarships would be instituted in the name of each deceased student per year, as Teju had demanded. The governor brought out the documents with regards to these, as well as the checks written out in the names of the families of the students. Teju, as a spokesperson for the families, was asked to sign in several places. She did, and the checks were handed over to her. The governor was very happy with himself. Teju genuinely thanked him for his help. She told him that she would report back to the mothers in the western region of the country that he had started to work with them. She reminded him of the other requests of the Market Women Association and of the people of the western region. The governor in turn promised that he was working on each of them one at a time. Teju took his offered hand when they started to take their leave of him, smiled at him, and thanked him again. The news of how Teju successfully received compensation for the people who were injured and who lost their children in the demonstrations went around the country. She began to receive invitations from other regional market associations to meet with them so that they could get to know her, and over the next month she traveled to the eastern, southern, and northern regions of the country, taking her 8-year-old daughter with her. The women were very pleased to meet with her, and they told her how much they admired her courage and wisdom. They offered her the presidency of the National Market Women Association that they were planning to organize, as they believed she would champion their cause, and that the women in the country needed to have a national voice to demand their needs of the government. Teju did not think that she deserved all the praise being heaped on her because she did not fight the government of the Western region alone. The mothers and the people of the Western region fought along with her. She was surprised at the women in the different regions, all of whom echoed one another as if they had planned it. She thanked them for having faith in her, but suggested that the presidency be put to vote, and if she won the election, she would be honored to lead them. 3 months later, the National Association for Market Women was born in a 2-day convention that was held at the stadium in Lagos. Teju became their first national president. Her whole family was there, and her father cried throughout the ceremony. He wished that his father were alive to see the day when all he had been telling him came to pass, for his daughter had borne the name he gave her when she was born. She had achieved a crowning glory indeed. And there ends my reading of chapter 8, ending at page 240. Thank you for joining me for the reading of Our Mother's Soar Expectations by Dr. Kende Adiola Ayeni.